What's a clear giveaway that someone is not actually as wealthy as they claim? I used to work as a valet for a fancy hotel. The truly wealthy people were not flashy. They didn't have any logos on their clothes, but they did wear well-fitting, high-quality materials that you might not even think twice about being expensive. They don't ask a lot of questions and go with the flow more than you'd expect. They just want things done correctly, and if you treat them well and do your job, they take great care of you, usually. People who were faking being rich typically had a flashy package on their car like way larger rims, wildly tinted windows, unnecessary trim, etc., big designer logos on their clothing and their bags. They throw the brand names of their bags into conversation. Can you grab me that Louis Vuitton bag over there? Instead of actual rich with Birkin bags just asking, can you hand me my bag? They ask questions like, how much is X? Whereas the truly rich don't care how much something was if they wanted to do it. The fake rich often would try to go against the flow or demand special treatment instead of seeing it as a bonus. They also typically tip less than your blue-collar looking people, which I also thought was interesting, likely due to blue-collar types understanding the struggle or working a service job at some point. Money talks, but wealth whispers, as they say. Story 2. Let me tell you about two rich guys I knew. We'll call them young guy and old guy. Young guy owned a small IT company and was flashy as heck. Latest Apple Watch, brand new Escalade, fancy clothes, always eating out at the best restaurants. His net worth, I would guess, was maybe $1 or $2 million, and he probably carried enough debt that he didn't really own any of it. He was self-made and just rich enough he seemed to want to show it off. Old guy was the opposite of flashy. Wore an old corduroy sports coat with leather elbow patches and drove a new but very ordinary Chrysler. Liked to eat at a greasy spoon diner that cost about $6 for breakfast. Nothing about him looked any different than any other typical old man, but he owned half the real estate in a couple of cities. I have no idea what his net worth is, but I would bet he was closer to $50 to $100 million. I think people who are mature, rich, and usually are the really wealthy ones, they've learned that it's better to just seem ordinary. Your real friends will figure out just how wealthy you are the longer they know you. The fake friends will be less likely to take notice of you. By the way, I was friends with both of them, and they were both very good, generous, and hardworking men. Just different attitudes towards displaying their financial status. Perhaps at one time the old man was flashy too. He just learned to put it away. I always admired that about the old man. Story 3. Definitely agree that the clearest sign is that anyone who talks about being wealthy isn't. More specifically, I see it in how people prioritize what they spend on their children. Spending $1,000 on modeling classes your kid doesn't want because you think it'll make them famous or poised, versus spending the same amount on art lessons because the kid actually enjoys art, so you find them the best teacher possible. Making sure your kids are dressed in designer clothing and driving the newest car and viewed as pristine in every situation, versus making sure your children go to theater performances and ballets because you consider it important that they be educated on these cultural concepts before they become a wealthy adult someday. Truly wealthy people see their wealth as a means to enhance their lives and the lives of their children in permanent ways. Sometimes it works, sometimes your kid is terrible, but that's usually the objective. And people who genuinely intend to be wealthy will follow suit. People with some money who think they've made it just pretend to be celebrities because that's the only concept of wealth they have. Also, I find it's the ones bragging about their constant vacations and showing off all the things in their house. Honestly, enjoy your trip, post pictures of the family, but nobody cares that you upgraded to the suite or this infinity hot tub was worth $40K. My cousin is multi-millionaire rich. They have a beautiful home, nice cars, lake houses, and you wouldn't catch him showing off anything. They're very generous and very private about it, but honestly, just meeting him and his wife, you'd have no idea until you saw their home. He wears old Eve Online shirts and flip-flops everywhere. So the real sign of wealth is not bragging about it? Guess I'll have to stop telling everyone about my solid gold toothpick collection. Story 4. When they have a business and for some reason the person who does payroll messes up more than once a year and payroll is late, they didn't mess up, the owner didn't have enough to pay, so they just blamed the payroll person and they just took the blame because they got paid. On the same note, they go through subcontractors often because the subs are tired of the very low pay or not getting paid on time. And I'm talking about, in both cases, like a few days late. It's small, but it's big. They rotate through multiple cards often, not that they have multiple cards on them, that they keep switching up which ones they are using. They're probably often closer to their max on a card or two, especially their favorite, and they can't get the credit limit increased. No one is as wealthy as they claim. The stock market is just a huge speculative bubble that could burst at any time. People are just hoping it doesn't burst until after they're gone. The truly wealthy people would profit from the crash, as the truly wealthy did in 1929. Immediate wealth, of course, went down, but not all of their wealth was propped up by the speculative bubble. Everyone was always looking for the next speculation. That's why so many on Forbes 30 Under 30 turn out to have been con artists that should have easily been spotted with due diligence. The bubble will likely pop within our lifetime. People are getting way too speculative at the same time that personal debt is getting way too high. Story 5. I went to college with a guy who's a financial advisor, wears a Rolex, buys a new Lexus every 18 months, wears Gucci sunglasses, etc. We're all pretty sure he only has a couple of client buffers before bankruptcy, never buys a round of drinks, and keeps up with splitting checks to the damn penny. A friend of mine who I also went to college with has family money a couple of centuries old. I'm fairly certain he couldn't spend his trust if he tried. The man drives a rough Jeep TJ, wears understated clothing that's typically covered in husky fur, has epoxy-together Ray-Ban sunglasses, loves Costco, but wears a different Patek Philippe or Richard Mille or Audemars every day of the week because he likes watches. He gave me his Grand Seiko Snowflake last year. As I once mentioned, I liked it and he thought the case was too large for him. He'd rather someone wear it than it just rot in his safe. When we go out, 99% of the time, a bill never makes it to the table as he has an arrangement at the establishment but asks everyone else to tip the staff well. Go figure. Story 6. Bragging about how much they have. Case in point, Elon Musk constantly wants to flex on people that he's one of the richest men on the planet. His wealth is mostly in the form of loans he takes out and doesn't pay. But because he's sold everyone on this illusion that he's one of the richest men on the planet, banks just keep loaning him money because they assume he'll pay them back. Dude can't even afford to keep the literal rights at Twitter on or pay rent, but he's bragging that he can pay Wikipedia $1 billion to change its name. Meanwhile, Bill Gates is some guy who doesn't try to get in the spotlight too often and owns Microsoft. Rich people who have money don't go telling everyone that they're rich. They just show it by having a lifestyle nobody else could possibly ever match. Most people who are actually rich don't want people to know they are rich, unless they're new money and just experiencing being rich and feel the need to brag. Mainly because they don't want to be used or taken advantage of. It's very easy to spot the fake rich people. Story 7. My dad used to sell cars and new salesmen were always told this story to reinforce the notion that everyone should be treated with courtesy no matter what they look like. So this guy walks into a high-end dealership in overalls and work boots. He looked around, but the salesman figured he was just ogling the merchandise with no obvious means to buy anything. A new salesman walks over, talks to the guy, gives him the spiel on different cars, etc. Basically, he treated this guy as if he was a VIP. Turns out that this guy that everyone refused to talk to was a farmer. In fact, he owned more farmland than anyone in the region. He was worth millions and wanted to treat himself for his 50th birthday. He ended up dropping 6 figures on a high-end sports car, paid cash, and drove it off the lot that day. Rich people loudly announce themselves. Wealthy people blend in with the crowd. Rich people might announce themselves with flashy clothes and loud talk, but the truly wealthy do blend in with the crowd. So if you see someone in overalls and work boots, they might just be the wealthiest person in the room. Story 8. I've never seen people claim to be wealthy. However, I think there are some typical patterns I see. Some people spend money on visible things and some people spend money on invisible things. For example, people that want to appear wealthy will live in a trashy apartment but will be driving a leased Porsche. As long as they never take you to their house, you might think they're wealthy. Also wearing designer clothes that broadcast the label. I've seen people wearing these really ostentatious belts with Gucci belt buckles or Hermes. Really wealthy people will be unconcerned with looking wealthy. So instead of wearing really recognizable designs, they'll be wearing custom-made clothing or artisan-made shoes. Really rich people want to buy the best quality consumer goods, not the most recognizable. And lastly, the quality of the jewelry they give their loved ones. One person I know comes to mind. He would brag about his real estate that he owned, which we found his parents actually owned, and his nice watches, many of which were actually fakes or not actually that nice, his fancy cars, etc. But when he gifted diamond earrings to his girlfriend that you could see were of bad quality but still bragged about them being diamonds, it was definitely noticeable that he really wasn't that wealthy. Story 9. If you look rich, you might not be. If you look very rich, you probably aren't. Many years ago, I ran a really nice hotel. This was in the days when if someone presented a credit card, you had to look the number up in a little book that came out every week to see if it was canceled or stolen. If a guy came in driving a big Lincoln, wearing a $1,000 suit and sporting a diamond pinky ring, you can bet I looked him up. He might be a fake. And if he spent time in the bar buying rounds for the house and charging everything to his room, it was nearly certain that he was a fake. If he came in wearing a tin hard hat and jeans cut off 2 inches above his ankles with orange suspenders, I pretty much knew he was okay. He was a logger and made good money. Wealthy people are modest because they don't want to get robbed, taken advantage of, etc. They don't want to date someone and worry that person only wants money or status. They don't want hatred or comments like, oh, you're rich. Most of the work to get wealthy is a grind, so if you make it, it's more like, whew, that was a ton of work, rather than, look how great I am. And then there is great power equaling great responsibility. In order to keep wealth, one must manage well, high attention to details, steady routine. Non-wealthy people light up as they talk about items they are acquiring and people they know. Story 10. I started my career in real estate development and have met more than one billionaire. You usually can't tell from the outside looking in if someone is wealthy. I've met plenty of wealthy people that look like slobs, and one billionaire was obsessed with Costco jeans. The one giveaway for me was the wealthier people really had no idea what things cost or what normal people earned in relation to what things cost. It's not that they wouldn't go through every line item on a project and push back on almost every price. They absolutely did. I mean, like telling a PM that made $75,000 a year that they should consider an $80,000 Porsche for their next car, or telling the receptionist to get her husband a Bell & Ross watch as a thoughtful gift for her husband, costs more than she earns in a month. The idea of having to finance a Toyota is just totally lost on them. Also, not really rich, rude to others, especially those in service positions. They think that shows they are wealthy and important. Dress what they think looks rich, not how they really are comfy. Their homes are ostentatious, a sign of very new and probably temporary money. Signs of real money, great skin, hair, and nails. They don't miss those appointments. Dress how they want to, might be extremely expensive clothes, but tend toward the casual. Very polite and patient with others, might blow up after, but not in front of others. Don't show off offering or buying the most expensive wine, etc., unless it's their actual favorite. They tip well, although I know extremely wealthy people who prefer their shoes well worn. Story 11. Spending money on things you can see, but not the things you can't. My husband's parents shopped the deals. His dad went back to the grocery store for a $5 price adjustment on a ham. His mom gets most of her things at Kohl's and buys cheap stuff half the time, even if buying expensive quality is better. They use phones, TVs, cars, all until they have to be replaced. But they paid for all 3 kids' college, bought each kid a $20,000 car, and now give each of their kids a pretty sizable amount of money each year for Christmas. They have a nice house because they got it custom built, and they own a pretty nice but small condo in Florida. Now that they're retired, they're traveling a lot more. I feel like people who pretend to be rich spend their money in the opposite way, only in ways people can see. Also, another story, my cousin works at an appointment-only women's boutique in Beverly Hills. I went to visit her a few months ago, and she showed my girlfriend and me the boutique after hours. I don't know anything about fashion, but there were shoes in there that cost like $4,000, purses over $10,000, and dresses over $20,000. Even the t-shirts and caps were over $300. But none of these clothes had labels on them. They didn't say Gucci or Prada or anything really. But they looked and felt nice. My cousin was in sweatpants and slippers, and she said this is what she usually wears at work. My cousin told me a lot of Hollywood people go there, no one famous really, usually the wives of producers and executives of production houses, etc. The boutique has a solid base of regulars that come in often. She said they mostly seem bored, but she said she could now easily spot when someone is very wealthy as opposed to doing well just by the clothes. The owner of the boutique makes my cousin fly over the world to research fashion and buy clothes for the boutique. She flies first class, all expenses paid. She often gets invited to luxurious parties with movie stars, sometimes gets to sit courtside at Laker games, etc. She makes about $250,000 off commission. Nice life. Story 12. Everyone is saying wealthy people don't flaunt it, man. It is very true. But there's also people who aren't exactly wealthy, maybe just well off, but they get one thing that makes them look wealthy and they flaunt in tacky ways. In my hometown, there's a guy on the not-so-rich side of town who owns a Lamborghini, and I always see him parked at the main mall, door open, just sitting in his car texting for hours, just texting and sipping on a coffee or something. One time I watched him pull up at a Starbucks, open his door and sit for about 45 minutes, then close it and leave. Didn't even go in. That was his usual Friday night plans. He really is all about being seen in his Lambo, never seen it on the highway at least. The people from the rich area of town all live up on the mountains and don't even go to the mall. They order stuff online and remodel their houses every other month. They DoorDash all of their food and only go to the safe, gentrified part of downtown to go out anywhere, or just straight up leave the city for the night. Also, I don't consider myself rich, but know that I have more money than many coworkers and others around. When I talk about having a wife of many years who also does quite well, kids in daycare, cars paid off, a house in a nice neighborhood, and some of the things we do with our time, none of them say much by themselves individually, but I've come to understand that as a whole, they speak quite loudly. I'm not one to ever brag, but sometimes it does catch up to me that even these small things speak volumes. Just a thought, and more than anything, an understanding that even though I don't have millions in the bank, I do need to remind myself to be grateful that I never have been worried about a paycheck, have healthy kids, and have fresh food every day, and that there are many out there that would enjoy just one or two of those. I only wish the best for all those around me, and certainly am not one to be greedy ever to the detriment of others. Story 13. Damn, a lot of people saying wealthy people don't talk about it. Some do, though. Some have egos they like to stroke. There are plenty of rich people who flaunt their wealth when it benefits them and sometimes when it doesn't. If you think that all wealthy people are wise about it or don't want the attention from it, you really are missing a whole chunk of people who are absolutely rich and go and flaunt it. There's a whole two genre of cars essentially dedicated to this. Who do you think is buying a Veyron? Some middle-class dude who wants to show off? Not even close. But rich as hell people who can't afford such cars, they buy them to show off how wealthy they are. Dubai is absolutely infamous for this BS. That and cars like the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Also a look at how wealthy I am car. That's who they cater to, insanely rich people who want to show off they can take away tons of money on a chauffeur's car. Who do you think is buying art piece watches like $50,000 Rolexes? Rich men who want to show it off. Rich people understand what other rich people buy and why. Anyone saying that pretty much every rich person keeps quiet is straight up just wrong. There's entire industries that outright cater directly to rich people only, and I mean multi-millionaires and richer, for the sake of showing off the wealth they've achieved. There are lots of multi-millionaires out there who absolutely love to flaunt their wealth at people. Acting like all rich people don't pad their ego is just stupid. Story 14. I used to work with a dude, G, who was in his upper 50s and getting close to retirement. His teeth were kind of messed up, not enough that he couldn't function, but he definitely needed some work done. One day, an old flame he had been stationed with in Germany like 30 plus years prior pops up on Facebook. They get to talking, reacquainted, and found out that the flame had never really gone out, despite the fact that they had parted ways and gone on to have their own marriages, kids, lives. So she left her multi-millionaire husband because it had been a loveless marriage for over a decade by then, to take up with G again. She got half of all community assets in the divorce, which was a pretty good amount. The first thing G and her did together as a couple was to get every tooth in their mouth pulled. Then, after they used temporary dentures to let their gums heal up, they got full mouth implants. I believe the total cost was something like $20,000 each. They got a deal because they were both replacing every tooth and all at once. Also, the temporary dentures didn't fit very well. G let everyone in the office know exactly how uncomfortable the process was in the most old man Carlin-esque way possible. IDK, where exactly G is now, last I heard, he rode off into the sunset with a full pension and the love of his life. I should hit him up again sometime. He was a really cool dude and knew a lot about gardening. Story 15. My husband and I got a pretty big check one time and decided to open up an account in a different bank for the deposit. We asked some of my more well-off friends, and they recommended a bank in the very nice area of the San Francisco Bay Area. We walk in nervous because 1, OMG, who gave us so much money. 2, this is going to be a pain in the back. They're going to think this is fake. And 3, I'm Whiskey Tango and he's blue collar. That being said, everyone was nice, but as we were setting up the account, a very disheveled older man walked in wearing gray sweatpants and white socks with no shoes. Now, at Wells Fargo or probably any of our regular banks, I would have expected this dude to have been stopped or talked to us as the PD were discreetly called. Why? Again, old messy guy in sweatpants, stained shirt, no shoes. What actually happened? He sat down with the banker next to us and they were chatting with each other like nothing. First name basis, he paid off one of his houses and moved $500,000 from one account to another. That's all I could eavesdrop on. The moral of the story? You never know. Story 16. So, story time. New York is my favorite place in the world, so I'm in my late 20s. I've gotten married, graduated college, okay, full-time job, bought a house, and we had a baby, fairly financially secure for the first time. After a year after we had our daughter, my wife said, why don't you take a week off and go stay with your friend in New York? So IDKY, but I think she was thinking this would be the last trip I could take for, I don't know, a while. I think I actually did way more of the baby care, time, attention, nighttime stuff than most dads do, and probably more than she was expecting. Whatever her reason was, I wasn't going to ask any questions. So a relatively cheap trip, stay with friends, eat cheap, etc. So one day my goal is to walk the island. Start at the southernmost part, walk up the center, end up at H&H Bagels. As part of this, I'm going to walk Fifth Avenue, at least the part where Tiffany's is. I'm hot, sweaty, summer. I have a backpack, Birkenstocks, t-shirt, maybe a baseball cap. Tons of rich people around, or at least tourists that look better than I do. The salesperson completely ignored everyone else, made a beeline for me. I thought it was like a security thing, like this guy is getting ready to rob us, but no. I don't know how she knew I was going to buy my wife a present, kind of like thanks for letting me go on this trip, but she knew I was going there to spend money. And if you're learning a thing or two and enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. As a person who knows many rich people, I can guarantee that not a single one of them wants to be known as rich. I went to school with 2 kids when I was younger. One's family was actually very wealthy. While he had nice things, he wasn't a braggart and he wasn't a schmuck. He didn't act entitled, he just had nice things. The other kid's family was trying very hard to pretend that they were wealthy while actually being in severe debt from trying to keep up with the Jonases. Their kid was an entitled schmuck who would pester people on the playground. Her family would do ridiculous things to show off how wealthy they were. Her family ended up broke and she had to change schools when they lost everything. The other kid just quietly kept doing what he was doing, didn't even find out how wealthy he was until we graduated from junior high and he invited the whole class over for a graduation party. That's when I found out that it was his family that had built the giant mansion on the hill overlooking the whole valley where we lived. We'd wondered about that house for years and it was a shock to find out I went to school with the kid that lived there. Story 18. As much as Redditors love to talk about how wealthy people wear clothes from Walmart and drive 15-year-old Camrys, I found that it's more of an if you know kind of thing. It's more of an attitude than an exact science. They might wear t-shirts, but they're usually pretty high-quality ones because who wants to deal with pilling and holes after a dozen washes? Polo is common, but not usually the stuff you see marked down at Marshall's. Shoes made with quality materials. A watch worth more than your car, but you probably would have to Google the brand, that kind of stuff. But also a general attitude that stuff is just stuff. Even if they only have a Rolex, it's a Rolex, not my Rolex. It's just a watch. Someone hits their car, oh well, that's what insurance is for. It's just a car. They were comfortable growing up, not middle class or upper middle class, but who cares about class when you're already at the top? That kind of thing. Story 19. Usually telling people about it at all would most likely mean that it's not true or not true to that extent, like he's smart but not a genius. Then there's also habitual signs, which require you to have a lot of wisdom and past experience to discern, or you are what they claim themselves to be. For example, they say and act as if they're rich, and if you are rich yourself, you can probably pick apart things that don't make sense. Like someone who has a lot of vacation photos around the world, but when you ask him an in-the-know question like, so did you get a visa for France, Italy, and the Netherlands for that trip? Must have been a lot of hassle, and they answer something like, yeah, the Italy and France visa was a smooth process, but it took a while to get the Netherlands visa. Then you'll know they're BSing because they all use the same Schengen visa. This applies not just to wealth, but could also apply to something like someone claiming they were a track athlete in school, but don't know what distances are used for racing or something. This could still mean they're fast, but not as fast as they claim to be. There's an exception to this, which is not too uncommon, but you won't see it a lot. There are people that actually are what they claim. They might just be seeking validation from the lack of validation in their childhood or life in general. Story 20. My brother worked as a personal chef at an exclusive hunting resort. He said it was in the attitude. The mega rich always treated him like a person, would ask him questions, would want him to have a drink with them, didn't have crazy requests, and always left a huge tip when they checked out. He said other than the expensive clothes and cars, you would think they were regular people. The lesser rich always treated him like the help, had ridiculous requests, complained about everything, and only tipped the minimum, and sometimes would try to get out of that. I remember one story about somebody who complained there weren't vegan options at a hunting resort, so they should get a discount. Like, come on now. Story 21. I worked a minimum wage job for a long time, and it was crazy to me how many of my coworkers could always have the newest iPhone, an expensive Starbucks drink twice a day, and obviously expensive clothes, hair, and makeup. It just all went on credit. However, it is ridiculously expensive to live where I am. $1 million for a 1,000 square foot home built in the 1980s level expensive. And I think the apathy over knowing they will never own a home no matter how hard they work and save leads people to simply buy what gives them that rush and makes their day-to-day life more enjoyable. Rent is also super expensive here, about $1,500 a month for a one-bedroom, about 500 square foot place. It's hard to blame people for spending the little bit of money they have left over at the end of the month on fun things rather than saving it. Story 22. Always talking about money and the big expenses that they're going to make in the near future, a second home, send their kid to an expensive college, exotic vacations, etc. It's all a delusional behavior to make others think they're cool and that life is a piece of cake for them. Whereas in reality, they're living off of debt and old money here and there. They're incapable of generating any income or at least any legit revenue. Whatever money they can muster, they'll spend it on branded clothing and make sure to rub it in everyone's face before it falls out of fashion. They're borderline psychopaths. And last but not least, they'll drive a car they can barely maintain that will end up being sold as scrap. The reason why they won't buy this year's supercar is because they actually are bad and the older model they own is way better, right? Ask me how I know. Story 23. I grew up very poor, living paycheck to paycheck in a trailer and so on. We are now millionaires after decades of school and debt repayment and my husband working multiple jobs for decades. We are from a small poor town in a rural area. I literally quit Facebook the minute we moved into a condo on the beach. I did not want anyone from where I am from to find out how well we live because we knew people would come out of everywhere to ask to stay with us. I finally gave in to keep in touch with my family far away and joined Instagram. Within a week, one of my 5 friends I had on my feed literally asked if we could put him and his wife up for a night and then shuttle them to and from their cruise that he thought we may live near. Like, what the heck? I haven't actually talked to this guy in years, even though I did consider him a good friend I wanted to keep in touch with. Shuttle? We don't even shuttle ourselves anymore. We Uber everywhere, so no, I will not be bringing you to the dock for your cruise. People think that when you're rich and live on the beach, you have no work or responsibilities. My husband is still working many jobs. I have multiple animals to take care of and a kid still in school. My family gets mad when I give one relative more money than the other, so yeah, I don't want anyone knowing where or how we live. Story 24. We had a guy show up to my high school 20-year reunion. In school, he was a pathological liar, and 20 years later, nothing's changed. He went, dressed apart, saying he was a millionaire and his life was all about traveling the world and sleeping with the most beautiful women in the world. When asked how he got the millions, he said he invested in Microsoft right before the boom happened. The face he made was priceless when he was told that happened when we were sophomores in high school, and he tried saying his uncle got them for him. Then he was told the stock at that time was the most expensive in the world to buy. Shortly after that, his house of cards fell. Also, someone else outed him when they said they saw him a couple of months ago working as a produce manager. Story 25. Wealthy people don't wear logos. Really, really wealthy people appreciate when you treat them and their money with respect while doing business with them. I worked in the service department of a luxury vehicle brand and had everyone from Real Housewives, ghastly, entitled, and awful in every respect, to the then governor of our state to the CEO of a very famous company come in. The governor was a schmuck and very, very cheap. The celebs and some, but not all of the athletes were all, "Do you know who I am?" The CEO would personally bring in his family's fleet of vehicles to get service, greet us by name, fill out the surveys, and not complain if all we had left was a low-end vehicle as a loaner. That kind of attitude and good manners is what old money is generally about. This very kind man could have paid my salary with the lint in his pocket but never treated me like the help. Story 26. Depends on what kind of wealthy. Disclaimer, I am talking about normal rich here, not Elon Musk type. These people are not billionaires. I don't know about the first one, though. My country is doing tragically economically, and most people barely scrape by, so the parameter for being rich is a bit lower. I know a guy who was like old money and never brags. His father is a well-known businessman in my country. He never flaunts his wealth, but somehow people know when they see him. He is my brother's classmate and also a very nice guy. I also knew a few people whose parents came from the working class and got money in the 90s during the war through not-so-legal means. They were bragging, but they were in fact rich. Those were the most pretentious people and the biggest bullies in my school. There were also poor kids who lied about being wealthy, but it's easy to see through them. My parents come from the working class. My mother is in the first in both sides of her family to finish college, and my dad is the first one to own a company. I never knew we were well off until my friends started noticing little things like how much more money I got as my weekly pocket money, or the fact that we travel 3 times a year, often on a whim, and own a cottage. I just thought everybody lived like that. Only when I moved out due to a mistreating home situation did I realize how much all the stuff costs. I did tell a few of my friends, holy crap, I think my parents are rich. Not me though. I live in a rented apartment and have zero money in my pocket right now, so I don't know what I'll eat tomorrow. In conclusion, I agree that the ultra wealthy don't brag, but people who recently got money, at least in my country, are definitely loud about it. Story 27. I'm a valet manager at a casino, and I know the sort of wealthy or newly wealthy guys tend to drive flashy, souped-up sports cars or huge trucks. They tend to talk more about how much money they spend here and there and act like they can do whatever they want, getting snippy if someone questions them. The very wealthy guys tend to drive more subdued luxury cars or stuff like an 80s Lincoln with bench seats. They tip $50 to $100 every time, so they never really get any gruff from us for doing whatever they want. There's a guy, Mr. C, who comes in and tips $100 in and out every time. Everyone will drop whatever they're doing to immediately help him, pretty much no matter what. He doesn't have to be pushy. His money speaks for itself. A $20 tip is great, but it's not like drop everything and help money. One time, someone told him he couldn't park himself up front, and he didn't fight. He just apologized, gave them $100, and said to park it wherever. It stayed parked exactly where it was. A semi-rich dude would take that as a huge offense and get managers involved trying to pester the valet who talked to him. Story 28. I've been working with ultra-high net worth families for most of my career. Although I make enough and have enough to be in the top half of 1%, these folks are in the ultra-elite world. I'm basically a working guy in their world. The ultra-rich are like everyone else. There are folks who scream super rich, big cars, big clothes, big homes, big... But they can't afford the homes, the planes, etc. There are others who are super quiet. For the guys in my world, it's the same. Some live for the big bottles of wine and some like a drink and a burger. For me, the clear giveaway is confidence. I can smell money from 100 yards based upon their confidence. Story 29. Had a coworker who was full of BS and talked about how he was a millionaire. Here's a sampling of his claims. Owns a Jaguar. When you buy one, they fly you to the factory in England so you can choose the note and sound of the exhaust. People there had worked with him for more than a decade and never saw this car. He drove a beat-up Dodge Journey and his wife had a used Chrysler 200. Owned stock in Trojan for years but sold it in the 80s during the crisis and made almost $1 million. He owned multiple car dealerships, had been a manager at another auto shop, was a commercial airline pilot, also a ship captain. Played golf with Trump once. This one became less frequent as he realized people weren't impressed with it. Story 30. When they call people poor as a teenager, also people who post their vacations to Bali on their Instagram, and tell everyone they're so rich for being able to go on vacation. A guy from my class only talks about the things he has, like the newest iPhone or his Apple Watch or his $22,000 car, which he took out a $15,000 loan for. He talks about how much his shoes cost all the time and how he has an $8,000 gaming setup in his room. He wears the biggest gold-plated chain and tells everyone it's real. My family's well off, and I do not talk about stuff like that. My dad has told me not to tell people how much money you have. The guy in question called his friend poor because he doesn't have the same things as him. I genuinely think people have the need to tell people about what they own because they want people to like them because of their money. He works at McDonald's but claims he makes so much money and talks about how his second cousin's dad's friend owns a business all the time. I truly believe that he's not as wealthy as he thinks he is because, well, he has no class. I have met many of my dad's bosses and acquaintances who make a lot, $700,000 to $900,000, I'm guessing, off what my dad makes, and they never flaunt their wealth like this 16-year-old. I swear I always see them in jeans and a shirt with some kind of old 70s band on them or a designer shoe brand you wouldn't come across on a monthly basis. Some adults I've met are similar to him too. Some people just need to have the nicest cars but also live in their cars because they can't afford a home due to their financial decisions. Story 31. I believe that most people who are wealthy are trying to keep that wealth because they know how easy it can be to lose it to stupid and frivolous purchases. Will they have expensive things that genuinely bring them joy or legitimately make their lives more convenient? Absolutely. But it's for that reason that they rarely have things that are visibly name-branded. Not only are you spending $400 on a bag, but that bag is gaudy and not necessarily crafted well and made to be durable. But would a wealthy person with a passion for making art pay $300 for a custom leather bag from a small business to hold their art supplies while they go out and do watercolors in nature? Certainly. That bag will be sturdy for decades and have a classic look to it. Leather is beautiful. But they'll probably have some ratty jeans they do their art in and a discreet car, but live in a home with a beautiful art studio and the best tools money can buy. They likely wouldn't have the newest iPhone just to have it. They'll have it if it contributes to their interests, but otherwise know that if they spend their money on any and everything, that they'll have less money for their craft and less money to allow them to live their independently wealthy lifestyle of, say, day trading and painting. Only someone who doesn't have a lot and cares about what others think will be decked out in the latest name brands while not being able to afford what truly wealthy people can. Basically, sorry, I couldn't afford a $7,000 a year service that makes my life easier because I spent that $7,000 on iPhones, Balenciaga, and a car note for my ugly new muscle car that isn't even gas efficient. Story 32. Sometimes you don't even have to look, they tell it themselves. I had a guy taking the same classes as me. I had some urgent business in the area where he lived, so I called him up and asked for a precise location as the place was like a maze, thinking he knew the place. He explained the route, and in common courtesy, I said thanks and yeah, meet up if you're out. I swear to God, his reply gave me cringe chills that haven't been replicated even after watching Indian TikToks. Nah, man, actually, my mom stuffed my bank balance so much with cash that if I have to withdraw, I'd have to go there and sign personally, so I'm kind of busy at the bank with the branch manager. I could not believe this was coming out from a fully grown adult who was trying to pretend to be rich. Story 33. Anyone who spends on luxury items, even an iPhone, but cannot afford basic needs, likes to mention big names, luxury items, travels as if they were a jet setter for real. I met a girl before who seemed to be reading by the book of etiquette. She saw me spray my perfume on my coat. She said, "Why do you do that? Don't you know how to spray perfume?" I was shocked. I told her I like to spray on my coat as well. She said, "Only on wrists and behind the ears. LMAO. These social climbers think everything should be by the book. So fake." By the way, this girl is a sugar baby. I just so happened to meet her at a party when I was a uni student. Went out for lunch with a high school friend. This was during uni days. She brought her friend. Her friend kept talking about the latest gadgets and expensive trips she wants to go on. At that time, I had an old iPhone model. I didn't upgrade because I didn't need to since it was still working. She asked me blatantly why my phone was still an old model. The audacity of this lady was astounding. I told her that I don't buy things that I don't need yet. She said her new iPhone was great. When the bill came, I told her I'll pay for our lunch. I made sure she saw my wallet and my platinum and gold credit card. After that, my high school friend kept apologizing to me and unfriended that obnoxious gal. Anyone who is too loud about material things and those who wear fake luxury items or wear luxury items head to toe are a clear giveaway for social climbers or the new rich. And well, if you like these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.